Co-creation, open innovation, design thinking, inclusive innovation, all of these are approaches how companies or research organizations could involve consumers, citizens, users into innovation processes. What approaches, to your experience, work best?
I think there are two main elements that determine which approach might work better. Is at which stage of the innovation process you decide to open up. So at which stage you decide to engage citizens or users, whether it is at the research and development stage, so you are still thinking of developing a product, or whether you have already a product and you want to change something in it. This makes a huge difference. So I think it's really a matter of when you want to implement this process, then you can have a full co-creation process from the start to the end, or you can have a moment where you want to change something. For example, in my experience, I'm a big fan of a very well-known method, which is focus groups. I've been using them a lot. They don't scare companies so much because it's something they're familiar with. It's used a lot in marketing, so it's something that sounds more familiar than co-creation. What is all this co-creation about? And it's a great start to get to know in a very short time, to get to know very well the stakeholder groups you are dealing with. So I really think the methodology that you use, the approach that you use, really depends on the context, on what you have, what is your objective and how you want to address it. And also it depends on who are the people you engage in this process, whether you have some experts with you that have some know-how on how to run in this co-creation process. It's not something easy to improvise. So it's great to talk about co-creation, but then how we do it and how we really approach it, it really depends on who you engage on board with you.
What are the most important challenges?
Being open to dare something new. What I've noticed is that it is often perceived as some companies sometimes have the tendency to try to make it fit with their normal routine. So, okay, let's try this co-creation, let's try to open up, but at the same time we want to be familiar with what is happening. There is a sort of fear of not knowing what is going to come out of this process. So I think the big challenge is being committed to it. So once it starts, it's okay to experiment. It's okay to go to the end. And I've hardly seen it not going well. It's really difficult not to have at least some valuable outcomes from the process. So it's really important to have a high level of commitment at all levels. So in the high level of the company, but also within the team that then will actually put this into practice. And then the challenges is also to manage to keep in mind that it's not, as I said, it's not business as usual. It's not one more marketing activity. It's really, there needs to be also some kind of, it needs to address somehow some type of societal needs. It's not just involving your users, your buyers, just because it's good to do so, but there should be some type of added value for all the stakeholders involved. And this is really a big challenge sometimes in these processes.
What are the main differences between open innovation and responsible innovation?
Responsible innovation has a whole added dimension, which is basically what I was trying to say before, having an added value towards society. So it can happen that, for example, in a responsible innovation process, you address challenges which are not directly connected to your daily activity as a company. I think, for example, of a project I have been involved in, financed by the European Commission, called Smart Map, where we have had a company that develops genetic testing in Spain that normally is used to, has a fantastic product. They run this test within their company. They receive normally their typical life cycle of their product is receiving a sample, analyzing, sending results back to hospitals, doctors, whoever. they have accepted to open up to a process of responsible innovation. So they have taken one of their products and they have interacted with patients and doctors through a structured methodology that we have put in place. And this has helped them realize that there is a whole a bunch of elements around these products that they sell that they would never have really addressed if it wasn't for this opening up process. So they could have simply said, okay, let's make it more open in the sense of making it more responsible to the environment, but this, including this element of responsibility, has really, on one side, helped them to better address societal needs connected to their products, and on the other side, also better understand market opportunities.
Does responsible innovation rather bring innovation to the CSR department or responsibility to the innovation department?
In many experiences I had, it really brings lots of innovation in the innovation department. It brings new idea, it helps anticipate trends, it helps better understand consumers' needs, but with this social responsibility element added to it.
Does responsible innovation and co-creation require specially trained facilitators, or can companies run such projects on their own?
I strongly believe that at least in the first time that this happens, when there is no experience at all, yes, they do need competence. What happens a lot is that, at least what I've seen happening, is also that it's not so easy sometimes for facilitators to work in the industrial context. I work a lot with people who have a lot of experience in responsible research and innovation, but we happen to work way more often with research institutions, policymakers, and less often with industries. The first few times I've been running similar processes with industries, I realized that I had to completely adapt and change the language I was using, or it wouldn't work. It just doesn't work. You can use the same approach that you use with a research institution. And this was a big challenge.
What are the most important differences between research organizations and industry? What did you have to change?
Within companies, you can really feel that the people that are working with you, that have accepted to take up these challenges of running something that has not done before, feel a lot of pressure. They have a sales department, a director that is saying, okay, let's experiment, but still this should not at all impact our turnover, our business as usual, or should even bring something better in. So what is it that is going to be our real advantage for us? And I think this is something that, this type of pressure, when we are more used to work within the public fields, the research institutions, universities, or we are not so used to having this type of pressure. So in that sense, I had to really understand what these people I was working with had to go through within their own companies, and really try to help them find the right words, the right approach, the right way of defending and believing in what they were doing within their own companies.
The responsible research and innovation concept has been put forward by the European Commission. Within Horizon 2020, more than 100 projects have been funded. However, many companies still have difficulties adopting this concept. What challenges do they face?
I think there is still some difficulties into doing this switch. So going from understanding responsible research and innovation as just let's pollute less, or let's try to be a bit more sensitive to society, to environmental needs in general, into let's experiment into really something more. We produce, our main product is genetic testing, so we don't need to look out of our building. We just have fantastic machines and scientists that work within our company, and they do a great product. But all of a sudden, if we look at the context around the product we sell, we see that how our main customers, how they struggle to access our service, or how they struggle to understand our service, how there is a complete lack of skills, even within doctors, for example, of understanding the outcomes of a genetic test, or for patients to access this type of tests. So all of a sudden, we can really understand that by acting within this context that is outside the walls of our company, we can actually bring added value to our own product, but also to society, because doctors and patients, they do need these tests. They have really hard times accessing them. So I think this switch of going out of the normal business as usual, that is actually being the biggest challenge.
Responsible innovation and open innovation means to involve people. Whom? How to select the right people for being involved?
What is really important is to reflect really well on this at the beginning of the process. Sometimes we don't think of specific groups that might be somehow touched by the service of the products that we do. So this is the very first brainstorming activity to do, is really to think about who could actually bring some valuable insights in all this process. And in my experience, something that is also important is not only who, but at which stages. So it doesn't really make sense, at least, well, it depends, but most of the time it doesn't work to just bring all these people together. It's not just because we have to do this co-creation and we have to open up that the solution is, okay, let's bring these people in, let's make them talk, let's talk all together, and we will come up with something. It's really important to have stages. So maybe it makes sense to have patients talk to patients at first, and doctors talk to doctors at first, and understand what are their needs and how we can interact with them, and then step by step bring all these actors together, but in a meaningful way. So it's not only about which groups to involve, but also how. It's very scary, for example, for citizens all of a sudden to be involved in processes that they don't understand, they don't know what it's for, and they often maybe feel a bit used. So it's really important to lead them step by step into this process.
How to manage the expectations of participants?
It is extremely important to keep the participants informed throughout the whole process. Otherwise, I have been involved in processes, a big pharmaceutical company, for example, that is financing startups in the biomedical field and wanted to involve different type of stakeholders into determining all together which would be very important topics on which these startups should focus. That's fantastic, but then throughout the whole consultation opening up process, so involving stakeholders ranging from doctors, researchers, policymakers, the communication about what would be, how their contribution, how all these discussions were going to be used has never been very clear, to the point that this has been really clearly perceived by the people that were involved, and in every single event we did, they were asking, so, but how are you going to use what we are going to tell you?
What about intellectual property rights and the expectation that my idea now might be taken up by a company that makes a lot of business out of it? Isn't that a problem for participants?
This is something that has to be absolutely protected and defined from the very start. So there needs to be a clear advantage and added value for the people that provide you, that contribute to this process. Their rights need to be there. The information they provide needs to be protected, needs to be dealt with in the most careful way, but they need also to be guaranteed an added value for them for participating in this process, and not just giving out information just because. So I think it's a big open issue, and it's being addressed a lot recently in projects. I think there are some advancements in this sense, but in general, this is one of the very first elements to address when running this type of processes.
Still, I'm interested in this question of intellectual property and ownership. You said you have to be very transparent from the very beginning, but in the very beginning you don't know the outcome. Mm-hmm. So you start in an open way, in an open process. How can you then be transparent about the outcome if you don't know the outcome?
You don't commit to outcomes, but you have to commit to a process and to some ethical elements within it. So you cannot commit yet to the concrete outcome of it, but you commit that you will use whatever happens in the process in an ethical way, and that you will actually, there will be an added value, some kind of return to the people that are involved. It's more a commitment on how the process is done, and a commitment on how you will use it, how you will make use of it, rather than on the specific outcome.
How can the benefits and the profits of an open innovation process be shared among the participants?
In my view, whether it involves companies or not, there should not be, as a citizens, if I contribute, it's my duty, it's my responsibility to contribute to a better environment, to a better city, better health. But at the same time, there needs to be also something in this process for me. If I'm just contributing to make it better, but it just keeps becoming more expensive, more difficult to access, then something is not working there. So there needs to be a benefit for all. For the company, of course, but for me also as citizen, as patient, as user, that I'm providing valuable information to make these services and products better. That's to me, that's when a real responsible research and innovation process is happening. And this has to be protected and has to be, that's when I was talking before about commitment, this is what I really meant by commitment. There needs to be an added value for all the stakeholders involved.
You've been involved in many European research projects. Did you experience any kind of differences between the different European countries regarding responsible innovation?
Yes, unfortunately, I think there is still a big difference between countries in Europe. What I've noticed is that there is a huge difference within countries that have a tradition of running participatory processes. For example, if I think of the Netherlands or Denmark, it's countries where it's quite common to consult patients throughout to better determine therapies and treatments. Denmark has a long tradition of citizen juries and citizen participation in many decisions. And there you can feel that companies and citizens are not so surprised to get engaged in this type of processes. It's perceived as something that has to be done, and that's very important to do. While there are countries, I've been working quite a lot in Italy. I'm Italian, although I live in Brussels since a long time. I have been involved in similar processes in Spain, and it's actually, unfortunately, countries where we are less used to be taken into account or to be addressed and asked.
What about the future of responsible innovation? What are driving forces and what obstacles lay ahead?
Driving forces, unfortunately, as we well know, is always funding. I think a big driving force will be whether this type of approach, whether it will be called responsible research and innovation or it will be called something else, but whatever it will be called, this type of approach, whether it will be still be a priority at European level within Horizon Europe, that will make, I think, a big difference. We have seen how important responsible research and innovation has become thanks to the big investment that the European Commission has put into this. So this will definitely play an important role on whether this type of approach keeps developing. But what I think that will also make a difference is also into how it will translate in the future. I see many discussions taking place on whether, for example, citizen science can be an answer to this transition to a better, more social, more responsible innovation. I think all these methods, all these practices can be very important element of, and I think this responsible research and innovation process can take place in many different ways, involving many type of stakeholders. But if it's not supported in the right way, if it doesn't stay as a global concept, but it just translates in one specific methodology, then it might fail. I think the big added value that has been in these last 7 years of having one reference term, so maybe not the best, not responsible research and innovation has not been maybe the best terminology to call it, but at least it has framed a whole concept that now is being experimented, and we have quite a lot of good examples, great examples, inspiring examples that have emerged from these European projects.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks to you.